Now we're going to talk about plastics. We have a door panel here that has a patch put in it. Up until about the middle 50s, this would have had to been leaded. This stuff wasn't available. Plastic really got a bum rap. Everybody that thought they had any body knowledge at all would use plastic, smear it over paint, smear it over rust holes, everything. It got such a rap that when people came into our shop, they'd always ask, are you going to use body plastic? Most of the time we used lead. A lot of times we used plastic, and we explained it to them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's an excellent product. People used to think that if they knocked holes in the body panels, in the different panels, and pushed the plastic through the holes, that would help it anchor. All it does, it causes it to rust back here, it works its way through, it raises up the plastic, and you end up with little spots like this on this old piece of quarter panel here where you have all these little bubbles. This was either caused by a little hole in the back, a little rust hole where moisture got in, or maybe a weld that wasn't cleaned properly. Plastic has got to be put over good, clean metal. And that's what we've got here. It's been thoroughly ground and cleaned. It has to be ground with a 16 grit grinding disc to get us something to bite into. And we've already done that to this panel here. So the next thing I'm going to do is show you the different products and the tools that are needed for this. We'll get rid of some of these pieces here we don't need. There are 100 different suppliers out there of this body plastic or body filler. What we have here is fiberglass Evercoat. We've used it for years. It's a good product. This one here is called Tack Free. This one over here is called Z-Grip. This is used on later model cars where most of the metal on the cars from the late 70s and up and through the 80s and 90s are galvanized. Some of the earlier cars in the 60s used galvanized rocker panels below the door and windshield posts. That's about the only parts you're going to find on a car in the 60s and the 70s with galvanized. And that's what this is designed for. But this is the product we're going to use. This right here is a real creamy type substance that's used over this to fill all the pits and to give you the fine finish that you need. The same goes for this. This is used with this product. Does the same job. Years ago you would use maybe a spot putty, which is nothing more than thick primer, and a lot of times caused a lot of trouble because it would shrink up on you. This does an excellent job. We have a board file. This long board file keeps your door panel or your quarter panel, whatever, from looking like this. It gives you a long flat surface that you sand with, and you usually sand a long ways with the car, not up and down. Here's a smaller block that you might use for smaller areas. We have a piece of steel here that we use as a mixing board. You don't want to mix it on wood, cardboard, or anything like that. There's an oil in this stuff. And if you mix it on wood or cardboard, it absorbs that oil out of there, and it causes some difficulty with your plastic. We have a couple files. They call these cheese graters. One's a flat one. We're not going to really use this flat one today. This other one's got a little curve to it. You can get it with a handle. We've never used a handle. We find it just as easy to use without the handle. This is the hardener that works with any of these products. We're ready to go. I'm going to clear away some of this stuff and only have up here what I need. And we'll start. Got a can of thinner here that we're going to use to wipe off the mixing board with and the paddle with, and a pair of rubber gloves. Thinner can really penetrate into your skin. Next, we'll just go ahead and get some of this stuff out and start mixing it up. This body plastic has an oil that'll float on top of it, and you need to mix it up. We'll take some out here now and put it on our mixing board. We need enough to cover the whole lower section of this door, just a real thin coat. That should be enough. Get the lid out of our way here. This hardener it should be knead first before you just kind of squeeze the tube, kind of mix it up inside so that you don't have the liquid come out. You just kind of have to figure this out here for yourself, how much you're going to need. When we get done, this should be the color of blue all the way through. If you find some spots in here that are not blue, those are spots that will never get hard, and you'll have to start over with your job. It's starting to change now. I can still see some dark blue spots and some white spots in it. It looks like it's mixed well. I'm ready to put this on the door. If this were a hot day, you wouldn't have much time to fool with this. When it's a little cooler out, it stays softer longer. My purpose here is to just put a fine coat over this and press it down as tight as you can, because you really want to make it adhere well. Don't worry about trying to level anything out. We're going to take it up about 6-8 inches higher than where we worked, just to make sure. If there's a problem there, it'll correct it. If there's no problem, it'll come back off. Just press good and tight. Make sure you get it down tight. If we get all these humps and bumps off of here, we won't have to fight with them later. This is already starting to set up. That's done with the first coat. We'll clean off this excess that we have here and wash our mixing board off and be ready for the next coat. Mixing up the second batch here, should be ready in just a minute. That first batch is cured for a while. It really depends on the temperature, how long you have to wait. Get my squeegee out here. This is the best thing to mix it with, is this squeegee. Just kind of roll it over, scrape it up. And again, it all has to be one solid color. I think I'll put just another dab of hardener in it. This is something you're going to have to judge for yourself, too. The people that make this, they make recommendations as to how to mix this stuff. But I tell you, temperature has an awful lot to do with it. You get too much hardener on a hot day, and boy, it's hard right now before you can get off of this board. I think we're ready to go. It looks uniform, clean through. What we're going to do here is the same thing we did before. We're going to put this on good and tight. That's really an important part of this, is getting it on good and tight. We'll get this first coat on tight like this, and then we'll come back and try to level it out. The better you put it on, the less sanding you have to do. And when it comes time to sand it, you'll remember that. As you can see, I'm really pressing down tight on this. I'm really trying to push it into every crack and cranny there is here. And then just come back and try to smooth it out. Try to get a good level thing here that you don't have to sand too much. As soon as this sets up, we'll take our cheese grater, our file, and we'll knock all the high spots off of it so that we don't have to sand them later. I can just about put a mark in this with my fingernail, and it still feels a little soft yet. It's time to use this cheese grater. And you just want to drag it across like this. All we want to do is just level the high spots off. You have to be careful with this that you don't pull it loose. You don't pull it up off of the other plastic. Once we get this part finished, we're going to have to wait for a while until it completely cures. And then we're going to use a sanding board on it. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to sand this smooth. And you notice the direction I'm going in. I'm going from front to back. That's the way you look at the car. You don't want to sand like this. I'm using a 40 grit paper. Once we get this all down, we're going to have some low spots in it. There's one here and one here. There might be a couple other imperfections. That's a normal course of things. What you'll do, we'll mix up some more tack-free body filler and we'll put it in these areas. And as soon as this sets up, we'll resand it. At that point, our next move will be to take the polyester putty and go over that, and after that it'll be ready for paint. Let me get finished here. Door really looks great. We've put a couple extra coats of body filler on here and sanded it down. Now what we have to do is to eliminate the scratches and the pits that we have in it. That's what we're going to use our polyester putty for. This is great stuff. You mix a catalyst with it and it gets hard immediately. You never have to worry about shrinkage. Years ago, when you didn't have that available and you had to use regular body putty, which was nothing but primer, just thick primer, it would shrink. It would harden on the top and take a long time for it to get hard clear through, and it would shrink. So what we're going to do is look over our panel here. We're going to have a few little pit holes in it. We're going to take a pocket knife and clean them out. We want to make sure that it's not filled up with all this dust from sanding. Just take an air hose and blow them out. Next thing we do is mix up some of this polyester putty. You do this the same way you did the body filler. It's got an oil on top of it. Mix it up thoroughly. This is a real creamy substance. And because of that, you won't have those pits that you have in regular body plastic. This also is a little expensive. This cost as much as the whole gallon can of plastic did. But it'll save you that much in time and effort. It'll also save you all that buildup that you would have normally done with primer, which is not a good situation. It doesn't take a whole lot of this. As soon as I get this mixed up here. This looks just like the other stuff, but it's not. It's more creamy, easier to work with. And what we want to do, we want to cover the whole door, or the whole section we repaired. We want to eliminate all those 40 scratches off of that 40 grit paper that we used. They say a good measurement here is about 1 inch of this to a golf ball in most of these plastics, but that really depends on the temperature and how quick you're working with it. Again, you don't want to leave anything in here that is not completely colored, or it won't harden. Get my squeegee out. This is the best thing to use when you're mixing this. You can just kind of fold it over. Before this stuff come along, and I don't think it's been out more than maybe 5, 6, 7 years. Before this came along, boy, you used to have to fight with plastic to get it just perfect so you didn't have that buildup. I've got this ready to go. We want to press it down tight, just like you did all the other ones. Just don't worry about thickness. What I'm doing is trying to get it completely covered so that those little pits, the 40 scratches, and any other imperfections that we might have in it are going to be covered. This will go right down in those cracks and pits. This is not the easiest stuff to sand, but if you put it on good and tight, good and smooth, you're not going to have a whole lot of trouble. Just smooth it out before it sets up. It's already starting to set up on me. When this dries, when this gets thoroughly dry, we're going to use this board file on it again. We're not going to use this 40 grit paper. We're first going to sand it with 80 grit paper. There's a big difference in the texture of these two. It's about half the size of the scratches. We'll first sand it with 80, and not too much, just to get it down fairly smooth. When we get it to that point, we're going to use 180 paper. You can't hardly feel this. This 180 paper will take out those 80 scratches, and it'll make it smooth to the point where it requires only just a little bit of primer and then your color over top of it. Let me tell you a couple other things, kind of reiterate. When we put that first coat on, we pressed it down tight. We didn't do any sanding. We just pressed a real thin coat down tight to get our base. The whole theory about this, if you don't get this down good and tight, if I was to take this stuff and flop it up here and spread it around, it's not going to stay. You press it down tight, you sand between each coat, you blow the dust out of it, and if you start with good, clean metal, you metal finish it the best you can. You start with good, clean metal, this will last forever. You'll never have a problem with it. But if you start with dirty weld spots or little rusty places or little holes in it, you're going to have problems. If you do it like we did this door, this will be on here forever. Nobody will ever know it. The edge of the door is still the same narrow thickness that it was before. Nobody can even look at that and tell. All we did with this plastic was to give us a good smooth surface and to eliminate the imperfections in the metal and any little waves we might have had in it. So hey, if you do this kind of job, you're going to get good results. Here's a tip about body filler. I'm going to draw a quarter panel on the whiteboard. Now, if you have a dent, say right here, another one here, you just go ahead and take your body filler and you repair those. But if you have dents, say here and here and here, you can still take your body filler and repair each one of those individual dents. But when you're finished, you want to take that polyester putty and you want to cover this whole area here. If you don't, those little spots are going to show up under your paint. When you cover that with polyester putty and you sand that in this direction like this, you'll never see them. You paint over top of it, you prime it and paint it, you'll never see them. Give you a beautiful job. What Ray's just sprayed on this old wheelhouse here is this stuff called feather fill. It's mixed with a catalyst. It's the same thing as this polyester putty or the regular body plastic we used, only it's liquid form where you spray it on. We used to use this all the time to cover up hammer marks under a fender, or if you had a body that had a lot of deep rust on it. Rather than smear on that polyester putty or regular body putty or plastic, this you can spray on, it fills and sand it down. It's great to work with. We hope we've shared a lot of tips with you today, gave you a lot of information.
And remember, it's easy. You can do it yourself.